Hi there, and thanks for spending part of your day with us. This is Leading Edge. I'm your host, Jeff Smith. Coming up in just a few minutes, the effort to make sure that teens know what they have in the United Way's 211. But first, it's Memorial Day weekend, a day for remembrance of those who have died in service to our country. And in a matter of weeks, Carol LaBounty and her family will undertake a journey thousands of miles away. They're headed to Normandy, France. This year marks the 80th commemoration of D-Day, when Allied forces stormed the beaches at Normandy in what was a devastating battle in World War II. Carol and her family will honor her father, who made quite a name for himself, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. Also joining me this morning is WTOL 11's Dan Cummins. Glad to have him alongside with us for this. Dan, as I'm sure you know, he has been on 15 honor flights over the last 7 years, storytelling with those war heroes who are traveling to D.C. to see the war memorials built in their honor. So once again, we appreciate Dan being a part of this. But let's bring Carol into the mix. Carol, thank you so much for spending some time. P-F-C George Rajner. George Rajner. That's why we're here today, is to honor your father, because his story is nothing short of incredible. Talk to us a little bit about your dad and why it stands out for you and why you pursue and continue to tell his tale.
Well, my father died in July of 1944 in Normandy, and I was an 8-year-old child at that time, but my father had enlisted in the service in 42, so he had not been here for quite some time. About a year and a half since the last time we had seen him. And as I grew up in that, I always wondered, what was his military service about, and, tried to find out as much as I could. My mother was very open with us and, related stories, about when they were younger, because they knew each other when they were young kids growing up and everything.
You did an interview once, you said 400,000 service members lost their lives, but then you said, you gave a number for how many children lost.
Yeah, there was over, like I told him, I said, I'm only one of the 800,000 surviving orphan children. Mm-hmm. We were considered orphans. Even Abraham Lincoln said, take care of the widows and orphans. And I belong to an organization called AWON, which is American World War II War Orphans Network. And this is all of these people are doing the same thing that I did, trying to find out who their fathers were and what kind of a legacy they have. I think we've been most fortunate because my father was married and had 4 children, where when you go there and you look at all these graves, most of these men were only between 19 and 24 years old, not married, no families. In our family, there's probably almost 100 people. Your
mom and dad were seeing in some of the photos, and this is going to be kind of a walk back through history, right, as you're going to take us through.
Well, this picture is like when my dad, this is what we looked like about the first year after he was gone. I think I was 7, and then my sister, who's next to me, she would be 6, and my other brother would be 4, and then the baby down there, he was 3. And he was 4 the day they buried my dad. They buried him on his birthday.
Carol, we can only imagine, Tom Brokaw famously called this the greatest generation.
Absolutely.
And you have a great perspective because you were young at the time, but you knew them as they came home from the war, stories about your father. At that time, even though he had 4 children at home, what a sacrifice to do that for everyone. He felt a duty he had to go because the world was in such a mess right there.
The whole world.
We had to save the world, both in the Pacific and
right.
in Europe, what was happening with the Jews and all of the countries being taken over by Hitler. So what's your perspective on what was deep in the hearts of these soldiers, that they would volunteer and leave their families and sacrifice? And during wars now, maybe you got a 1 or 2 year hitch and you're coming home. These guys would serve as a blank check.
Well, if you read the enlistment where he enlisted, I got a copy of that. It says on there, for the duration of the war, or more or less at the president's discretion. So that told everything to you. Mm-hmm. You didn't know how long. Some people were in for 5 years.
Talk a little bit about, you talk about his enlistment and
right.
going down to Georgia and being a part of what became...
Well, that was a volunteer force,
yeah.
And he volunteered for that duty. I know when he first enlisted, my mother didn't know it.
Wow.
I know. We didn't have a telephone. Everybody didn't have phones in those days, but our next door neighbor had a telephone. And one evening, the lady came over and she said to my mother, "You're wanted on the phone." So my mother goes over next door And it was my father, and he said he had joined the Army. And my mother said she thought he was, pulling her leg, and she said, oh, forget about it, get yourself home, blah, 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 And a few days later, a package came with his clothes in it. So then we knew, he really did. So he went to Indiana and then to Missouri. And at that point, then they were deciding, past his physicals and all that stuff. And then he decided that he wanted to volunteer for the paratroopers. And that's when they were sent to Toccoa. Mm-hmm. And they were the first group that trained at Toccoa. There were only 4 units that trained at Toccoa. So he was there from first part of August, and they finished up their training around, they marched from Toccoa to Atlanta. The first week, they finished that on the 4th of December, and on the 26th of December, they had their Christmas party, and then they went to Fort Benning to take their paratrooper jump training, and then from there, they went to Fort McCall.
He had 3 jumps, you say, as you remember.
Jumps.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, when they were in North Africa, and the reason that he was sent there was to join up with the 82nd, which they did put him into the 505, and he was D Company. So they made the first jump into Sicily, which was in July of 43. And they were there about 30 days, and then they were taken back to North Africa. And then they jumped into Salerno, which was in September of 43. Mm-hmm. And they were there about another 30 days. Then when they came back to North Africa, they got on a ship. And he wrote a letter to me at that time. And he said it was Thanksgiving, and they had a really nice Thanksgiving dinner. And they didn't know where they were going. They were in the Atlantic, and everybody was speculating, oh, we're going back to the States. No, we're going to go to England. They went to Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. And they were in a place called Cookstown. And there's a gentleman that wrote a book about their stay there. They were only there about January, February, March, and it was too cold, too rainy. They couldn't train, so they put them on ships, and my dad sailed to the Firth of Forth, which is in Scotland. Then they trained him down to a place called Quorn, which is in the area of Leicester, which is in the Midlands, and that's where the 505 trained. Now the 101 and the 508 and them, 101 was in Aldhorn, which was south. The 507, I think 508, they were up around Manchester. I went to Quorn, and the field is still there.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to track down information?
Oh, well, no computer.
Right.
No computer.
To track down information about
sit in the library,
not just your dad specifically, but even his unit, and find out where they were.
Microfiche.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I found a lot of stuff, yeah. Well, then
old
I
newspaper article. For those who don't know, that's going through a bunch of old films.
Yeah, way back, even to the Newsbee. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
But my mother was an honorary member of the local paratrooper unit here, and my mother never drove, so I would take her to the meetings. And I found out there was a newspaper called the Static Line, which was put out in Atlanta by this one paratrooper, and I got a copy. He was a butcher at the local meat market, and I said to him, can you give me that? His name was Tino Madrid, and I said, yeah. So he gives me the newspaper, and in the newspaper, it lists all these different people that are like re-signing up and reunions, and I seen the thing for a reunion of the 505. So I called the guy in Florida, and I told him who I was, and he said, oh, you're welcome, come on down. So I called my brother, because he was stationed at Fort Bragg when he was a paratrooper. He said, yeah, we'll go. So we drove down, and that's where we got acquainted, and we're standing there watching these guys do this. They're on a wire, and then they just jump,
Yeah.
And this guy comes up to my brother, and he sees this name tag, and he pokes him in the chest, and he said, I haven't seen that name, he said, for 40 years. He said, you're not George. He said, no, I'm Robert. They put my dad's name on it.
Oh.
And so then he introduced himself. That was Milton Schlesinger. And we got acquainted, and we sit and talk. His wife, Catherine, was there. And we, over the years, we met every once a year and, just chatted with these guys, get information.
Carol, we're going to have to take our first break.
Sure.
But stay right there. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of weeks. You guys are heading to Normandy again. We're going to talk about that trip. They've been there 5 years ago for the 75th, the 80th coming up. We'll be back on Leading Edge right after this. Welcome back here on Leading Edge on this Sunday. Along with Dan Cummins, I'm Jeff Smith. Glad to have you talking with Carol LaBounty today about her father, P-F-C George Rajner, who obviously D-Day, we're leading up to the commemoration, the 80th
so we had
for that.
3 combat jumps. It was Sicily, Salerno, both in Italy, and then he came back and then trained for the ultimate jump on June 6, 1944.
Right.
What have you learned about that?
Well, he was fortunate. I met the one fellow that was Pathfinder, and they call it a stick. They landed on what they call drop zone 0, which was the closest to St. Mary Glace, and he was so proud of the fact that he was one of my dad's friends. And he was explaining to me, how they were, all over the place and everything. But D Company formed up, they were right there. They weren't at Lafayette, which was A Company. They were more to the, not south, but I think kind of north of St. Mary. And then I don't know too many things what he did while he was in Normandy, because there's, not a lot of information. I've got the report on when they took Hill 131. I went to the National Archives in Washington and got the whole Normandy campaign from that.
Which was a German stronghold, right? And they were told to report and take that.
Right, they did. And in the report, it says it was raining, and they jumped off for the attack around 6:30 in the morning. And my dad's buddy was with him, but he got called back to headquarters. And my dad's other friend said to me that they were going up this hill, and there was supposedly like a small riprap wall, stone wall. And he said they were taking turns going through the small opening. And he said when it was my dad's turn, when he got up, he got hit. And they took him out and put him on the road and laid him on the side of the road. And then Jules said he went over and talked to him. And he said, my dad told him, he said, well, I think I got the $1 million wound. I'll, be going home. And then when his buddy George came back from headquarters, one of his people there said to him, he said, your buddy got hit. So he went to the aid station. That's all they had.
Yeah.
I don't even know where the aid station was. When we go to Normandy next week, there's a gentleman there that I become acquainted with a few years ago. He's going to take us to that area. He lives there.
You've traveled to Normandy multiple times.
About 8 times.
The beaches and seen your father's
walked
gravesite.
up and down everywhere.
Talk a little bit about going to this 80th and what it means to you.
Well, I didn't think I was ever going to make the 80th when I was there on the 75th. I'm going to be 88 in September.
Oh, God love you.
I never thought I was going to make it back there. God willing, I'll still make it. But no, it's not just to honor my father, it's to honor all of them. There's so many of them. There's almost 10,000 buried there, plus the Wall of the Missing, which they never show on camera. It's in the back of the big monument, and it covers every service that's back there. And I don't know, there's got to be a couple thousand names back in there.
Dignitaries, you said President Trump, Macron was there the last time.
Yeah, there was a representative, the Prime Minister from England, President of France, President of the United States, all the vets that were there. They were be on the stage, and it's a very nice ceremony.
Even at the young age of 88, I mean, do you still get over there and have a kumbaya moment with others like you who have sought out that information?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And have you struck friendships?
I mean, it's something that all of us, we call ourselves, kids, but we all say the same thing. Most people don't get it. They don't. And
Dan, you get this sentiment when you travel on honor flight, do you not?
I've been on 15 of these flights. I'm going on the 16th on June 11th. And the veterans are so fun to talk to. Early when I started doing honor flight in 2017, 18, 19, I would talk to a World War II veteran. And more than one occasion, I would talk to the veteran, and they would talk and talk and talk and give me some really interesting information.
Right.
And usually their handler is a daughter or a son, and they go,
never told me that.
He would never talk about it. My dad never talked about it. And I guess because they just get caught up in the moment about being at the memorial and deciding to open up about it.
Well, they're with their comrades, more or less.
True.
Right. And when we had reunions, we had a girl, and she had a nice video camera, and she set it up. And what we did is they took like 4 veterans at a time, put them at a table, and just let them talk. We never said a word. We just sat back there, and they just talked all kind of stories back and forth about this happening and that happening and who did this and who did that. And she's got all those videos from the 505. I'll tell you, she's got a treasure.
Carol, we've got about 30 seconds left. Band of Brothers is a name that's ballyhooed a lot, and
Right.
your dad was a part of that.
My dad was an original member of the Band of Brothers, the 506E from Toccoa, and he was with him from the beginning. And then in April, then he was, because at that time they were only a training unit. They were unassigned troops. They were not 101 at that time, and all of those people, I mean, I know my dad wasn't the only one that was put into another unit. Some people think he was transferred, but he never was. There's no documentation. I looked and looked. I talked to generals, and they just said it was wartime, and if you had a skill and they needed you, that's where you went. And at the time, my father was 25 years old when he enlisted, and he was 27 when he passed away.
I tell you what, part of me, I've wanted to go on this trip with you to watch
should.
your I know, trust me, to watch your interactions here. But I think for Dan and I both, we wish you the best of luck. Safe travels as you head to Normandy
Thank you
for the
so
80th
much.
commemoration.
And thank you for your service.
And thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back for this Sunday here on Leading Edge. United Way 211 is a free and anonymous information and referral service available to anyone in Lucas, Ottawa, or Wood counties with a health or human service need. Now, 211 connects the community with resource advisors around the clock to get information about food, housing, utility assistance, employment services, a whole ton of stuff. But there's a group that really needs this knowledge, and Wendy Pestrue, she joins us, the president, CEO of United Way of Greater Toledo. Thanks for being here. There's a group that this call, it's fallen on deaf ears. Talk a little bit about the message you want to get out to teens and why.
Well, it's interesting because we brought this back about 5 years ago, right before the pandemic we started. And, you know, obviously we see a lot of calls from folks who are a little bit older, who might, you know, need some help and don't navigate the computer very well. Well, over time we started studying the data and realized, you know, the call volume for the ages of 19 to 29 was very high. During the pandemic, because we were setting folks up with meals and that sort of thing, I was explaining earlier, we had one day or a week where over 20% of the calls were people under the age of 18. Trying to find food. So we thought,
was that a red flag for you
oh yeah,
guys?
no, big red flags. So we thought, you know, what if we tried something where we talked to teenagers while they're in school and actively learning about 911 and Connect Toledo and all the resources in the community. We'll level up a little bit and teach them how to navigate the database for starters so they really understand what community resources are, but then also how to help their families. So many of our teenagers in our community have younger siblings that they're trying to support. And then in our community, we have a number of them that have grandparents they live with.
Right.
And in these focus group, Jeff, it's been so great because like we've had kids ask about getting a walker for their grandmother. We've had kids ask about training after they get out of high school. What could they go do? Resume services, food for younger siblings, you name it. They can see where this is a path to help.
Is it them providing a service, I guess, as a beacon for this service? You know, because what I'm hearing out of you, it's like, I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, well, sometimes I have to hand my cell phone over to my daughter or my son if I want to take a selfie a certain way, and they have to show me the way. I'm hearing that from you so that they can be the messenger in all of this.
Exactly. See, and I think sometimes, you know, there's something about kids, stop, drop, and roll. You know, they think the things we teach them, and they remember it. How many stories do we tell about a kid who said, I'll go call 911 when everybody else is hysterical?
Right.
So the thinking was maybe if they learn a little bit about it, and then they, to your point too, help us as focus groups, like they told us about changing the font on a couple of things so that it was a little more legible for them.
Or,
you know, funny little things where I think we will make the service better as we learn from these younger folks, but then we hope that while maybe the world around them is getting a little crazy, they can have some focus and know those resources are available. It's so much easier than Googling. Getting in touch with 211 and a resource advisor who navigates all that data every day, it makes a huge difference, and so it can help them with that.
I was asking about the messaging and getting out to, you said focus groups first and foremost. I immediately thought schools, going into the schools, and you said this may be part of a plan that is a few months down the road.
Yeah, so we've been doing the focus group work now, and we'll incubate some things during the summer and then in the fall. And the former fire chief, Brian Bird, is on our board. One of the things we hope to do is more people learn about this, especially younger folks. Reducing the 911 call volume has always been a goal of 211. If we have better messaging and people using it first, maybe they won't use that 911 number inappropriately. They have a very high run rate with 911, and it will be for calls that could really be addressed with 211. So we want to help maybe...
We hear that time and time again, as far as people thinking that's the number they need to call, but in honesty, you're saying 211 may be a better option?
It may be. Like if you're getting evicted or you're running out of food, and sometimes they call 911. And we think teenagers, if they're sort of indoctrinated into this, will teach a generation about how to use 211 and 911 and differentiate the services, but then maybe help their families with it as well and know it's a good resource.
Yeah, and it also, I think it builds a little bit of community spirit as well, does it not? As far as having these young people with the knowledge to be able to share.
Absolutely. And Jeff, if one of those kids enjoys working with it and maybe they like researching the database, if they want to become a community resource advisor someday, I like to think of it as a workforce development opportunity as well.
Yeah. What have you guys found? We've got about a minute left, but what have you found probably if you had to pinpoint one or two things that 211 has been such a difference maker in this community?
Well, admittedly, because we brought it back, it had been outsourced to Cleveland, and I think during the pandemic especially, I put the words into it, drive it like you stole it, to our 211 people. Any way we can use this during the pandemic to be supportive. As a registration tool in crisis, whether it was food or vaccinations, we have a lot of people that don't have great digital literacy skills or access. 211 can take care of that for them. So it's a great resource.
And easy to remember. Wendy, thank you so much for kind of enlightening us on all of this, and hopefully the message gets out there. If you don't have a teen in the house right here, right now, share it with them. Let them know.
Yeah.
Wendy, thanks. We'll be right back. Welcome back for a final time. Of course, it is a long holiday weekend. It's the unofficial start of summer, but it's also a weekend, as we said at the top, to remember those who have died in service to our country. Say a prayer, plant a flag. We hope to see you next time here on Leading Edge.